My name is Clara Bennett. I'm 20 years old, and I'm in my second year of college. I never thought I would become the kind of girl who wrote about her family online, pouring out private pain for strangers to judge. I used to think stories like this belonged to movies, the kind where everyone's emotions were too dramatic and every betrayal landed too perfectly. But then my parents asked me to drop out of college so I could save the family bakery. Not because I had failed, not because I had no future, but because my younger sister, Tessa, still needed time to figure herself out. And apparently, my life was easier to sacrifice. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew our bakery before they knew us. Bennett's Bakery sat on the corner of Maple and 4th, with faded blue awnings, old wooden counters, and the same bell over the front door that had been there since my grandparents opened the place decades ago. People came in for sourdough, cinnamon rolls, coffee, birthday cakes, and gossip. It wasn't fancy, but it was familiar to my parents. It was more than a business. My mother called it the heart of our family. My father called it our legacy. To me, it was where I swept flour off the floor before I was tall enough to reach the register. As a kid, I helped because I had to. I refilled pastry trays, bagged bread, wiped tables, and smiled at customers who pinched my cheeks and told me I was such a good daughter. My parents always talked like one of us would take over someday. Me or Tessa. But even then, I knew it would probably be me. Tessa was 18, 2 years younger than me, and she had been the golden child since the moment she learned how to smile on command. If she cleaned her room once, my parents praised her like she had rebuilt the house. If she passed a math test, she got headphones. If she went a week without skipping chores, she got a new game. I brought home good grades, worked weekends, helped at the bakery, and maybe got a tired, good job, while my mother handed me another task. By high school, I stopped expecting fairness. I focused on escape. I worked hard, earned scholarships, saved what I could, and made it to college. My parents helped with part of my tuition and rent, but I worked part-time at a diner to cover books, groceries, and whatever else came up. For the first time, I could breathe. Still, I came home on weekends sometimes, and every visit came with little comments. You're so reliable, Clara. We don't know what we'd do without you. You understand the bakery better than anyone. Meanwhile, Tessa barely showed up. She would drift in wearing oversized hoodies, steal a croissant from the case, tap at the register for 10 minutes, then disappear. When I asked why she never helped, my mother always sighed. She's still young. My father would add, she needs encouragement, not pressure. But I was only 2 years older. Apparently, that was enough to make my dreams disposable. One Friday, during my second year, I drove home thinking it would be an ordinary visit. Dinner. Awkward family conversation. Maybe a few hours at the bakery. Then, back to campus. Instead, when I walked in, the house felt wrong. My mother sat stiffly on the couch. My father was in his armchair, hands folded, jaw tight. Tessa lounged near the window, scrolling through her phone. One earbud in. My stomach tightened. My mother spoke first. Clara, we're short-staffed. Your father and I can't keep doing this alone. We've decided it's time for you to step up and take your place in the family business. I waited for the rest. Then she said it. We want you to drop out of college. For a moment, the room went silent in my head. I stared at her. You want me to, what? The bakery needs you, my father said, leaning forward like he had rehearsed it. Tessa isn't ready. She's still figuring things out. But you're responsible. You've always been the one we could count on. I looked at Tessa. She didn't even lift her eyes. So she gets to figure things out, I said slowly. But I don't. My mother's face tightened. This isn't about comparing you two. It sounds exactly like comparing us. Tessa finally looked up and smirked. I'm not really cut out for bakery life, she said casually. I have bigger plans. The words hit me like a slap. Not because they were surprising, but because no one corrected her. My mother reached for the soft voice she used when she wanted guilt to sound like love. You know how much this bakery means to our family. We've sacrificed so much for you. It's time for you to give back. Give back. My voice cracked. I'm working. I'm studying. I'm paying part of my own way. And now you want me to throw it all away because Tessa doesn't feel ready. My father's face darkened. This isn't about fairness. It's about family. That sentence did something to me. It made everything clear. They had not called me home to ask. They had called me home to obey. I'm not dropping out, I said. My mother blinked like I had cursed at her. My father stood slowly. If you walk away from this family now, don't expect us to keep supporting you. No tuition. No rent. No phone. Nothing. Fear rushed through me so hard. My hands went cold. They knew exactly where to strike. I looked at my mother, waiting for her to soften. To say he didn't mean it. She only whispered, We've sacrificed enough for your education. Then Tessa laughed under her breath. Guess you're not as reliable as they thought. I stood up. My legs were shaking. But my voice was not. I'm not dropping out of college. My father pointed toward the door. Then don't bother coming back. I waited 1 second. Then another. Some childish part of me thought my mother would call my name before I reached the hallway. She didn't. So I walked out. And when the bakery bell rang, in my memory, it didn't sound like home anymore. The drive to my best friend Marcus's apartment felt longer than it actually was. I barely remembered the route. My mind kept replaying the conversation inside my parents' living room over and over. Each sentence cutting a little deeper than the last. Drop out of college. We're done supporting you. Don't bother coming back. By the time I pulled into Marcus's parking lot, my hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my fingers ached. He opened the door before I even knocked. One look at my face, and his smile disappeared. Clara. What happened? For a second, I couldn't answer. The moment I stepped inside, everything I'd been holding together threatened to fall apart. I dropped my overnight bag beside his couch and simply stood there. Exhausted. Marcus didn't pressure me. He handed me a bottle of water, motioned toward the couch, and quietly waited. When I finally told him everything from my parents demanding I quit college to the ultimatum they'd given me, he stared in disbelief. They actually expected you to give up your degree. I nodded. For Tessa. He let out a slow breath. I've known your family for years. But Clara. This is insane. I managed a weak smile. I was starting to wonder if I was the crazy one. You're not. His answer came so quickly that it caught me off guard. They're asking you to sacrifice your entire future because your sister doesn't want responsibility. Those are two completely different things. His words eased a tiny knot inside my chest. That night I slept on his couch, or at least I tried to. Every hour I woke up imagining another bill I couldn't pay. Tuition, rent, utilities, books, groceries. Everything my parents had threatened to cut off suddenly became terrifyingly real. Around 4 a.m, I finally gave up trying to sleep. I stared at the ceiling wondering whether standing my ground would cost me everything I'd spent years building. But every time doubt crept in, I remembered Tessa's smirk. That alone reminded me why I couldn't go back. The next morning, I decided to return to my parents' house. Not to apologize, not to negotiate, just to collect whatever belonged to me. Marcus offered to come. You shouldn't have to deal with them alone. I appreciated it. But I shook my head. This is something I have to finish myself. He wasn't convinced. If they start anything, call me immediately. I will. As I drove toward the house, every mile made my stomach tighter. It already felt like I was visiting strangers. When I walked through the front door without knocking, my mother was standing in the kitchen, sorting invoices across the table. She looked up. Instead of relief, Disappointment filled her face. So. She folded her arms. Have you finally come to your senses? There wasn't even a hello. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I'm here for my things. For just a second, her expression softened. Then it disappeared again. You know, she said quietly. Your father and I are only doing this because we love you. I almost laughed. Love wasn't supposed to feel like blackmail. Without answering, I walked upstairs and opened my bedroom door. Everything looked exactly the same. The bookshelf, my college acceptance letter pinned beside the desk, photos from high school, my old soccer trophies. It was strange how a room could still look like home while no longer feeling safe. I pulled a duffel bag from the closet and began stuffing clothes inside. Sweaters, jeans, my laptop charger, textbooks. Every object I packed felt like another goodbye. Halfway through, a familiar shadow appeared in the doorway. Dad. He leaned against the frame, with his arms crossed, watching, waiting. You still have time to make the right decision. I didn't stop folding clothes. I already have. You think college makes you better than your family? No. I zipped another bag. I think everyone deserves the chance to build their own future. Our future is right here. He gestured downstairs toward the bakery. That bakery fed you your whole life. I know. It paid for your education. I know. And now you're abandoning it. I finally looked at him. I'm not abandoning anyone. His jaw tightened. You are. No. I took a slow breath. I'm refusing to give up my future, because Tessa refuses to grow up. The moment I said her name, his entire expression hardened. Your sister needs time. So did I. Silence. You never gave me any. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he looked away first. Instead of answering, he muttered something under his breath and walked downstairs. That silence told me everything. He didn't have an argument. Only excuses. I had nearly finished packing when another familiar voice drifted into my room, leaving already. Tessa. She leaned against the hallway wall with a lazy grin, earbuds hanging around her neck. You know, she said, you're making this way more dramatic than it has to be. I ignored her. She continued, anyway. You could have just stayed and helped. I laughed bitterly. Funny. What? I don't remember hearing you volunteer. Her smile faltered for only a second. I'm working on bigger opportunities. Bigger opportunities. I shouldered another bag. You've barely worked a full shift at the bakery in your life. She rolled her eyes. I meant for something more. I couldn't believe the confidence in her voice. Our parents had praised her for so long that she genuinely believed responsibility belonged to everyone else. You know what I said? This isn't just mom and dad's mess. She frowned. What does that mean? It means if you had stepped up even once, instead of letting everyone carry you, none of this would have happened. She laughed. Not mid-problem. Those 3 words echoed through the hallway. Not mid-problem. No remorse. No guilt. No appreciation for everything our parents had sacrificed. And yet somehow, I was the selfish daughter. I walked past her without another word. There was nothing left to say. At the front door my mother was waiting. Her eyes were red. She looked like she had been crying. For a heartbeat I almost felt guilty. Almost. If you walk out now. Her voice trembled. I don't expect us to help you anymore. I know. No tuition. I know. New rent. I know. No phone. I figured. She took one hesitant step toward me. You'll be completely on your own. Her words were meant as a warning. Instead, they became motivation. I'd rather struggle building my own life. I tightened my grip on my bags, then spend the rest of it living someone else's. Neither of us moved. Finally, I opened the front door. The afternoon sunlight hit my face. For a strange moment, freedom and fear felt exactly the same. The next morning, reality hit harder than I expected. My phone displayed one message after another. No service. At first, I thought it was a network problem. Then I checked my account. My parents had canceled the family phone plan. Less than an hour later, I logged into my banking app. A notification flashed across the screen. Rent payment failed. My stomach dropped. Mom had canceled the automatic payment they had been making for my apartment. On a B1? Every promise my parents had made became another weapon. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about making independence hurt enough that I would crawl back. For a brief moment, I actually considered it. Maybe going home would be easier. Maybe I could pause school. Maybe. Then I remembered Dad pointing toward the door. Don't bother coming back. I remembered Mom watching me leave without stopping me. I remembered Tessa smiling. The doubt disappeared. I drove straight to a discount phone store and bought the cheapest prepaid plan I could afford. After that, I spent hours changing passwords, removing my parents' access from every account, updating emergency contacts, and making sure no one else could interfere with my finances again. Only then did I realize how much control they'd quietly maintained over my life. It was exhausting. But strangely, every account I secured made me feel a little stronger. By evening, Marcus found me sitting at his kitchen table, surrounded by paperwork, receipts, and notebooks filled with calculations. He looked at the mess and smiled. Looks like someone is building a new life. I looked around the table. It certainly didn't feel glamorous. It looked terrifying. But for the first time since walking out of my parents' house, it finally looked like my own. Over the next couple of weeks, my life settled into something that almost resembled a routine. Almost. During the day, I attended lectures, trying to focus on assignments, while my mind constantly drifted toward overdue bills and tuition deadlines. Evenings were spent at the diner. Late nights belonged to spreadsheets. Every dollar had a purpose. Rent, utilities, gas, groceries, books. Anything extra disappeared before it even reached my account. I stopped buying coffee on campus, canceled every streaming subscription, packed sandwiches instead of eating out. Some nights dinner was instant noodles because they were cheaper than almost anything else. It wasn't glamorous, but every sacrifice was mine, to make, not one forced on me by someone else. Marcus noticed the changes before I did. One evening after my shift, he slid a takeout container across the table. You forgot dinner again. I ate. You had crackers. I was saving money. He raised an eyebrow. Saving money doesn't mean starving yourself. I laughed quietly. I'll survive. His expression softened. You shouldn't have to survive all the time. Clara. Those words stayed with me longer than I expected. While I was learning how to rebuild my own life, news from back home kept finding me anyway. Small town gossip had a way of traveling faster than the internet. Customers talked, employees talked, neighbors talked, and before long, people I barely knew were telling me things about the bakery. One afternoon, my friend Chloe stopped by the diner. She ordered a coffee she didn't really want. I knew immediately she had something on her mind. You've heard about your parents. I shook my head. What happened? She hesitated. The bakery doesn't look good. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? The shelves are half empty. She stirred her coffee slowly. There aren't as many pastries anymore. Your parents look exhausted. I saw your dad arguing with a supplier outside. I stared at the table. She continued carefully. And your mom snapped at a customer. I almost couldn't picture it. My mother had always believed customers came first. For her to lose her temper, things had to be bad. People are talking? Chloe admitted. They're saying business has really gone downhill. I nodded slowly. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated. Instead, I just felt sad. No matter what my parents had done, that bakery had been part of my childhood. I learned multiplication by counting cash in that register. I celebrated birthdays in the back kitchen. I knew every loose floorboard. Watching it fall apart felt strangely personal. At first, I assumed the problem was simple. They had lost an extra pair of hands. Mine, without me covering weekends and holidays. Maybe everything had become overwhelming. That explanation made sense. Until it didn't, more rumors began circulating. Suppliers weren't getting paid on time. Invoices were piling up. Equipment repairs had been delayed. Someone even mentioned seeing collection notices. That wasn't normal. The bakery had survived recessions, floods, and a pandemic. Something much bigger had happened. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Eventually, curiosity won. I started asking quiet questions. Not my parents. Never them. Friends. Old employees. People around town who knew pieces of the story. Most didn't know much. But everyone agreed on one thing. The bakery's financial problems had started months before I walked away. That didn't make sense. If they were already struggling, why hadn't they told me? A week later, Chloe called. I think I found something. She sounded nervous. My cousin used to help your parents with bookkeeping. I frowned. What kind of something? He found copies of some paperwork that accidentally got mixed into old files. My heartbeat quickened. What paperwork? I think you should see it yourself. That evening we met at her apartment. She spread several photocopied documents across the dining table. Loan applications, financial statements, property records. Most of it looked confusing. Until one page caught my attention. Commercial loan agreement. Borrower, Bennett Family Bakery. Collateral, business property. My chest tightened. They had borrowed an enormous amount of money. Far more than I expected. I kept reading. Then, another document appeared beneath it. Additional collateral. Partial mortgage. On my parents' home. I looked up. They mortgaged the house. Chloe nodded. It looks that way. I couldn't believe it. The bakery, the family home, everything they owned, risked at the same time. But why? I assumed the answer was obvious. To save the bakery. Until Chloe quietly slid over one final document. This is the part that confused everyone. At the top was a proposal. Business development plan. Applicant. This Bennett. I blinked. No. That couldn't be right. I kept reading. Luxury gaming cafe. Premium esports experience. Exclusive memberships. VIP rooms. Projected annual profits that looked like fantasy. The pages were filled with colorful charts and unrealistic promises. No business history. No experience. No investors. Just buzzwords. Modern. Innovative. Luxury. Revolutionary. It sounded less like a business plan, and more like something copied from motivational videos online. I looked back at Chloe. This can't be real. It is. My hands started shaking. They borrowed against the bakery. I swallowed hard. For Tessa, Chloe nodded slowly. That's what it looks like. Everything suddenly made sense. Every confusing conversation. Every guilt trip. Every ultimatum. They hadn't demanded I quit college because they desperately needed help. Not entirely. They wanted me to replace the labor they were losing, while they poured money into Tessa's dream. The bakery wasn't the priority. Tessa was. Again. My parents had been willing to gamble everything. The business. Their home. My future. All because they believed the golden child would somehow become successful if they just gave her one more chance. I leaned back in the chair. I can't believe this. Chloe looked sympathetic. I'm sorry. So. Pieces continued falling into place inside my head. They never told me the truth because they knew I'd say no. She nodded. You probably would've. I definitely would've. There wasn't a universe where I would have sacrificed my education, so my sister could chase an expensive fantasy funded by family debt. The realization hurt more than I expected. Not because of the money. Because of the deception. If my parents had simply admitted they were in trouble. If they'd honestly asked for temporary help, maybe we could have talked. Instead, they chose manipulation. Threats. Ultimatums. Lies. Over the following days I kept hearing more. Apparently, Tessa's big opportunity had barely moved beyond presentations and online research. She spent weeks talking about investors. Months talking about branding. Everyone else did the work. She did. The dreaming. The cafe never opened. The investors never appeared. The money disappeared anyway. Meanwhile, my parents kept borrowing. Convinced, success was just around the corner. The bakery quietly carried the weight. Until it couldn't anymore. That night, I walked across campus after my last class. The autumn air felt colder than usual. Students laughed outside the library. Someone played guitar near the fountain. Life continued around me as though nothing had changed. I sat on a bench and stared at the lights, reflecting across the pond. For years I had believed I wasn't enough. Not talented enough. Not grateful enough. Not devoted enough to my family. Now I finally understood. The problem had never been me. I had simply been the dependable daughter. The one expected to sacrifice. The emergency solution. whenever someone else failed. And once I saw that truth, I couldn't unsee it. I pulled out my phone. There were 3 unread messages from my mother, another from my father, one from Tessa. I didn't open any of them. For the first time, I realized I wasn't curious anymore, because I already knew exactly what they wanted, not me, what I could do for them. And those were 2 very different things. By the time the semester reached its final stretch, I had settled into a rhythm that, while exhausting, and finally belonged to me. Classes during the day, the diner almost every evening, homework after midnight. Weekends were spent catching up on assignments or picking up extra shifts whenever someone called in sick. My apartment was small. My budget was painfully tight. And I still counted every dollar before buying groceries. But every time I unlocked my front door after work, one thought crossed my mind. No one could threaten to take this life away from me anymore. It wasn't easy. It was earned. The emergency scholarship had covered part of my tuition, and a small student loan filled in some of the remaining gaps. My manager eventually trusted me with additional hours. And although I was constantly tired, I was finally standing on my own feet. Marcus noticed it before I did. "You smile more now," he said. One evening as we cleaned up after dinner, I laughed. "I'm exhausted." "I know. So how am I smiling?" "Because you're not waiting for someone else's approval anymore." His words lingered in my mind long after he left. Maybe he was right. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to earn my parents' love. I was simply living. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally, I ignored calls like that. Something made me answer anyway. "Hello?" For a few seconds, there was only breathing. Then, I recognized the voice. Clara. Mom. She sounded different. Older. Fragile. Almost broken. "I've been trying to reach you." I stayed quiet. She continued. "The bakery?" Her voice cracked. "Is in serious trouble." I closed my eyes. "Here it comes. We need you to come home." Not "how are you?" Not "are you okay?" Not "I'm sorry." Just, "we need you." Again, I let the silence stretch between us. She rushed to fill it. Things didn't work out the way we expected. What happened? She hesitated. Tessa's business. She couldn't even finish the sentence. It failed. I wasn't surprised. What about the bakery? We're behind on payments. She sounded like she was crying now. Customers have stopped coming. Suppliers won't extend credit anymore. Your father and I can't keep up. There it was. The truth. Everything had finally collapsed. We can't do this without you. I looked around my tiny apartment. Second-hand furniture, cheap curtains, textbooks, stacked across the kitchen table. None of it was impressive, but every single thing inside those walls belonged to a life I had built myself. "I can't come back." Her breathing became uneven. "But we're family." "I was family when you told me to abandon college." She didn't answer. "I was family when you canceled my rent." Silence. "I was family when you cut off my phone." Still nothing. "I was family when Dad told me not to come back." A quiet sob escaped through the phone. "We made mistakes." "No." I spoke gently. "You made choices." Before she could respond, another voice interrupted. "Dad, I've had enough of this." His tone hadn't changed. "Not even after everything. You've made your point." "My point? You've punished us long enough." I almost laughed. "You think this is punishment? You abandoned your family." "No. You abandoned the bakery." "I refuse to sacrifice my future." "You owe this family." His voice grew louder. "We raised you. You fed me. You clothed you. We paid for school." I finally interrupted him. "And then you used every one of those things as leverage." Silence. "You mortgaged the bakery." No answer. "You mortgaged your house?" Still silence. "You invested everything in Tessa." His breathing grew heavier. "We believed in her." "You believed in her more than you ever believed in me." He slammed something down on his end of the call. "You don't understand sacrifice." I felt years of buried hurt rising inside me. "No. I understand it perfectly." I took a slow breath. "You asked me to give up my education. You expected me to work for free?" You threatened to make me homeless? You cut me off because I said no. I paused. And now you're asking me to fix the consequences of decisions I never made. Neither of us spoke. Finally, he muttered. We didn't think it would end like this. I know. That was the tragedy. They genuinely hadn't. Before I could end the call, another voice appeared. I want to talk. I almost said no. Instead, curiosity got the better of me. What? You think you're better than us now? There it was. Still, no accountability. No. You could have saved all of this. I stared out my apartment window. I didn't take out those loans. You could have stayed. I didn't convince Mom and Dad to mortgage everything. You abandoned us. I shook my head. You keep saying that because it's true. No. My voice remained calm. I stopped rescuing people who refused to rescue themselves. She scoffed. You've always been jealous. That sentence would have destroyed me a year earlier. Now, it only made me sad. I spent my whole life trying to earn the place you were given automatically. She didn't respond. I hope someday you understand what responsibility actually means. Then I hung up. The apartment became completely silent. I stared at the phone for nearly 5 minutes. No anger, no relief, just finality. I opened my contacts. Mom. Block. Dad. Block. Block. Then one by one, I blocked the relatives who had spent months sending guilt-filled messages without ever asking what had really happened. When I finished, the screen felt strangely empty, but so did my heart. Not because I regretted it, because I finally accepted that some relationships couldn't be repaired by sacrificing yourself. Weeks passed. Final exams came and went. I earned some of the best grades I'd ever received. My manager offered me additional responsibilities at work, along with a small raise. It wasn't life-changing money, but it meant someone believed in me because of what I had accomplished, not because of what they could take from me. One afternoon, Marcus met me outside campus, carrying 2 coffees. He handed one to me with a grin. You survived. I think I did. You know, he smiled. I'm proud of you. No grand speech. No dramatic celebration. Just 4 simple words. They meant more than he probably realized. Sometimes I still drove past the old bakery. The lights weren't always on anymore. The parking lot looked emptier than I remembered. Part of me mourned what it used to be. The smell of fresh bread before sunrise. My grandparents laughing in the kitchen. The feeling that home was a place instead of a condition. But another part of me understood something. I had spent 20 years trying to learn. A family legacy isn't measured by the business they leave behind. It's measured by how they treat the people they claim to love. Mine had chosen favoritism over fairness, control over trust, manipulation over honesty, and in the end, those choices cost them far more than my help. They lost their daughter, not because she walked away, because they pushed her there. As for me, I'm still in college, still working, still building a future one difficult step at a time. It's not the life my parents imagined for me. It's better, because this one finally belongs to me.